Hey everybody, welcome back. So I think I found the holy grail of how to avoid getting flat tires. Did a little experiment starting 2 months ago and about to go over the results, but before we get into that, if you enjoyed this video at the end, if you're not already a subscriber, you might want to consider subscribing to my channel. I'm always putting out videos, tutorials on how to enhance your cycling experience, be it keeping your bike maintained or many other things. But anyway, hit that subscribe button, hit the bell. You'll keep getting all my videos. I put them out at least weekly or so, not more. So anyway, back to the point. So a couple months ago, I had been, this is my commuter bike here that I typically commute 36 miles round trip every day on, and approximately almost a little over a year ago I'd moved down here to Denver and started commuting a lot, and was having a lot of issues with flat tires initially. Lots of goat heads out here. It's kind of the same as Oklahoma where I came from, and from what I understand many other places in the country have this issue as well. So anyway, started commuting, getting lots of flats. So what I did initially was put some tubeless sealant in my tubes, and I basically switched between several different tire combinations. Sometimes it's during the winter, you get some snowing, icy weather, so I would have my ice tires that had the studded spikes, get traction and such, and other times I would use just a knobby tire for a lot of the gravel options along the route of my commute, and then as these tires are basically just a slick. So anyway, I've been using that setup. I put just some tubeless sealant in my tubes. I didn't have a tubeless tire setup, so I wanted to try something just to try to avoid the flats, and put the tubeless sealant in. Made a video a couple months ago how I went 7,000 miles with no flats. So I wanted to do a little experiment, take it a step further, and so I put these road tires here. This is a 700 by 32. It's a Bontrager AW1. It's just some random tires that were laying around the shop that were actually used at the time, and put them on here with the tube, started fresh, and just wanted to see how far we could go without getting a flat. And that was 2 months ago. The result, I've gone almost 1,200 miles. It's 1,166 miles so far, and no flat tires. And I basically, the terrain that I'm riding on, my commute is, each way, it's about 18 miles each way. The first 6 miles is mainly through just kind of residential side streets, and then it gets into a little busier side streets with some bike lanes, and then it goes through the Denver Technology Center. There's bike lanes through there. Some of the areas are a little questionable as far as they kind of vary, and sometimes there's glass and things like that in the bike lanes. But then after about 6 miles, I get up to the Cherry Creek State Park, and then from that point, the options are pretty varied. I can ride the gravel trails for about 5 miles. I can use the multi-use bike lane path or whatever, or I can just use a kind of a rough lake road type thing. So gets through there, and then from there it's mainly the Cherry Creek trail essentially for the next 12 miles, and from there there's all kinds of little shortcuts, little single track trails and other gravel options along the way. But anyway, I would say overall probably I can daily do about 10 to 12 miles of gravel, dirt road, single track total. So anyway, part of this experiment was I was taking those the majority of the time, and then probably the last week or two I was purposely riding in some of the the worst little shortcut cut-off trails that were almost overgrown in a lot of places. Places historically where I'd gotten flats earlier on when I'd started commuting and things like that. But yeah, and sometimes I would even get off the trail and ride directly into the grass and the side terrains, things like that. So that's kind of one of those things that's I would always advise, don't ride off the side of the trail or ride on the edge of the trail, because that's where the worst debris and goat heads and things like that, things that can cause punctures and flat tires, are typically in that area. So anyway, purposely rode in that stuff the last couple weeks, had no issues. Obviously, as of now, this is the bike. I haven't ridden it in probably a week and a half because I got my new bike and I've been riding that to work mainly. But anyway, I just put the bike here in the rack, and it's still, front and rear tires are both holding, I would say, approximately 60 psi just from the feel. I didn't put a gauge on here, that's just kind of what it feels like. Anyway, so I don't know, kind of my thoughts on it at this point is putting tubeless sealant. It doesn't really matter what kind. I use the blue Bontrager TLR sealant, but if you want to use stains, orange seal, whatever, I think you're going to get the same result. And there's kind of always been the options of, from what I see on forums or just people talking, at the shop here and there, whatever, it's either you run a tubeless wheel setup, or you run these super robust tires that are, you run tire liners and you run a gator skin, or you run a Schwalbe Marathon, the specialized armadillo, something like that, which I pretty much ran all of those at some point or another. And kind of my experience is those tires they kind of ride like junk. They feel like you're riding on garden hoses instead of a nice, I've ridden at the other extreme too, with some pure race tires that last 700 or 800 miles, that are pure race tires, super high TPI count, that are super thin, no flat protection, and they ride and corner and hook up like butter. So I feel like, as far as, there's kind of these two spectrums of you got to run one or the other, and kind of from what I found is, with a tube with sealant in it, you can kind of have your cake and eat it too. You can get nice ride quality and not have flat tires. So I guess that's just kind of the point of the video. One thing I've noticed in doing this is that I never even really thought about, was that there's quite a few side benefits. And so whenever you put tubeless sealant in a actual tubeless tire, most of the tires are actually what they consider like tubeless ready. So what that means is that there's not you can run a tube or you can run it tubeless. So the tire itself it's got a nice hook on the bead that locks in place and things like that, but the actual tire itself is somewhat porous. So if you don't run sealant in it, it's going to leak air out. So when you put the sealant in it, you got to work it around, coat the whole tire, and then it basically seals up. It seals up little punctures, things like that, and then you've got a nice ride quality. You can run it at super low pressures, which is great if you're riding a mountain bike. But for a commuter bike, do you really need to run really low pressures? I mean, from what I've found, this 32, I've run this, and then I've run some of the fatter knobby tires because I'm riding gravel so much. But at the same time, if I'm riding on the trail, it's kind of it's not super efficient. So I found this 32 for a commuter setup works pretty well on everything. It's not great traction in the gravel stuff, but it's doable. So I would say my average pressure on this thing was probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 to 75 psi. Just without putting a gauge on it, I would guess right now we're at 60. So in this total 2 months, I've actually inflated this tire a total of 2 times. So the initial inflation, and then from there just 2 times when I randomly felt like it was getting a little low. So that's kind of a side benefit as far as with having that tube. For one, this environment that I'm living in Denver, the recommendation is if you have a tubeless tire, you need to refresh that thing every 2 to 3 months, because it's going to just, the porousness of the tire itself, it'll leak out. You're going to run it, the fluid will basically evaporate in a few months, so you have to refresh it over and over, or otherwise you're going to be constantly inflating your tire. So what I found with a tube in there, that butyl tube, it doesn't leak air. It's not quite as porous as the tire just alone. So I found that I didn't have to inflate my tires often, which to me that's not really, I don't really care that much, but it's nice that you're not having to, I would just do kind of a field test every day before I would get on the bike and ride it. I would put a pressure gauge on it. I'm pretty in tune with what I know a good pressure is just from the finger test there, and so I literally only inflated the tire 2 times in that entire month. So that's one benefit. Second benefit is just the ability to run lighter weight tires. I mean, tire's not a super lightweight tire, but it's a pretty cheap, basic tire that came as an OEM tire on a bike, like a Domani or something like that. So it was used when I got it. The overall, I don't know, I definitely wore it down quite a bit. It's getting towards, I don't see any cord showing, but it's getting pretty flat there on the top of it. But again, it's not a super robust tire. I mean, I might even try it with something even lighter weight than this, but the ride quality is decent. It's not a super thick tire like a Schwalbe Marathon or Continental Gator Skin hard shell, things like that people like to have a tendency to run to avoid getting flat tires. So that's kind of side benefit too. The ride quality is, with a thinner tire is pretty great compared to something really thick. I'm not super worried about running a super low pressure. If it's a mountain bike tire, I think tubeless is always the way to go. Once you kind of get into the gravel spectrum, the wider the tire, I would say the more benefit you're going to have running a tubeless setup. But the narrower it gets, especially something like this, once you get below, I don't know, I'm thinking 34, 32, anything narrower than that, really you're better off running a tube in the tire, because you can't really run that low of pressure. You could probably get down to 30 or 40 psi, but you're kind of I don't know, you're risking damaging your rim, in certain terrains, things like that. Especially commuting, I would say really probably 45, 50 is really the lowest I would be comfortable riding with, especially since you're going to be on pavement quite a bit of the time. So I think narrower than that, you get into the road tubeless, and honestly, most people do it just to avoid flat tires. So it's like if you want to run tubeless, it's kind of it's kind of a more compromise than what you really need, because you get it. If you cut your tire away or you do get a puncture, it's not sealing. It's a major pain to try to take that thing off and switch it on the road. And what you'll do is put a tube in it to get you home or whatever, continue your ride. That's kind of the thing with putting a tube in there initially, and that's kind of why I started doing this initially, is because I do run different tires for different situations. In the snow, I'm going to run a studded snow tire for the ice and things like that. Sometimes I like running a knobby tire for if I know I'm going to be doing some big gravel rides, things like that, or other times I would ride a slick road tire like this, which for the majority of my commute it's going to be the most beneficial. So I found myself switching tires quite a bit. If you have sealant in your tube, it's super easy to, by hand just pull the tire off, put the tube in. It's a lot less messy. If you're out in the, that's kind of another thing here. I'm riding home. I'm somewhere in the middle of Cherry Creek State Park. I get a major puncture. It's going to be super difficult at night to switch something like that out with a tubeless setup. And so that was kind of the reasoning for doing a tube within a tire with the tubeless sealant in the first place. So this slime product is something I don't really recommend. I've installed it on thousands and thousands of bikes, and from what I've found, it just typically clogs up the valves and causes a slow leak situation. Yeah, I'd say overall, I would highly recommend, if you're running anything narrower than a 34, 35C tires, to strongly consider, road bike or whatever, to run just tubes within a lighter weight tire with tubeless sealant in it. I think you'll have pretty good luck with that. At least that's what I found from my experience. So anyway, yeah, hopefully you enjoyed the video, and thanks for watching.